Hi, and welcome to Still Evolving, where we explore the truth behind lasting performance and resilience. Rather than relying on perfection or superhuman ability, our conversation will highlight how real strength emerges through simple, intentional habits grounded in self-compassion, adaptability, and the ability to grow through life's inevitable setbacks. Today's guest is Emma Hutchens. Emma is a strategic advisor to founders, family enterprisers, and private equity investors navigating moments that materially impact enterprise value. With executive leadership experience across global consumer brands, high-growth startups, and corporate turnarounds, Emma brings clarity to complexity and discipline to decisive inflection points. Her work sits at the intersection of governance, leadership, capital, and operations, ensuring businesses emerge from transition stronger and more valuable. She specializes in crisis strategy, generational transitions, founder to operator evolution, and value protection during ownership changes and growth equity investment. Emma partners with boards and investors to assess leadership risk, align operating cadence, stabilize culture, and instill the structural rigor required to unlock durable enterprise value. A certified coach and trusted board advisor, she is known for diagnosing quickly, surfacing hard truths with precision, and building trust across divided stakeholders. Through Barrington and Company, she advises a select group of clients at high-stakes moments where reputation, capital, and legacy intersect. Please welcome Emma to Still Evolving. Emma, welcome to Still Evolving. Grateful for you and this opportunity to have this conversation.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Why don't we start off just giving an opportunity for you to share with our audience a bit of your background on your journey, maybe where you came from and what you're working on.
Absolutely. Well, I'm glad to share a bit about my journey, and it's been an interesting one. So, I've spent most of my career in HR, although I'll tell you, it hasn't really been a traditional path, which for me has been a great deal of fun. And I think it couldn't have happened without some really fantastic advocates and mentors and champions along the way. I'm not sure I would have seen the path for myself in the way that it's kind of come to fruition. So, I started out in the spirits industry and spent most of my career in that space. I took a little left turn towards tech at one point and a little right turn towards fashion and then a bit into food most recently. I was at a company called Impossible Foods. And so I've had a lot of fun. Right, working in this HR people space across different industries. It's one of the things that I've loved really about HR is that it's agnostic in terms of category and kind of the true philosophies and principles of talent and unlocking, I think, business potential through people can be lived anywhere in any category with any category dynamics. And so that's been a whole lot of fun for me. And now I'm in the midst of building a business. So about 6 or 8 months ago, I started Barrington and Company, which is a consulting consortium. So I've got partners who are just fantastic around the world, Middle East and Europe. And it's been a lot of fun just kind of getting that off the ground with them.
Excellent. I appreciate what you shared around so many of the fundamentals of how we can help optimize our people, help support them, and
Yes.
optimize our teams really are performance domain agnostic, if you think about that. I've been sharing,
Yes.
I come from the lens rather than HR, but just looking around human performance. And I shared back that much of the work from AP Performance is built on this gold standard model that was found in performance domains such as sport, later also in special forces, military. And yet so many of the challenges we're seeing similar, like burnout, the
Right.
challenges of performing under pressure in these very fast-paced, uncertain, dynamic conditions, the lack of team optimization, right? And so
Yes.
very much appreciate that work and in your passion, right? And how you can continue to support that. I'm curious in those leadership roles, I cannot imagine it was not without challenge, adversity along the way. Certainly that's only in your professional role. You're a whole human having other roles in your life. Can you share back a bit from your experience, some of the takeaways, maybe when you have seen challenge and adversity, seeing other leaders navigate that with their people,
Mm.
or certainly lessons you've learned for yourself of perhaps mindsets, other actions that you have found tremendously valuable for leaders who are leading their teams through challenge and adversity?
Yeah, I'll tell you, I've really enjoyed being on some incredible executive leadership teams. What we're all searching for, and you touched on this a bit, is really high performing teams. How can we create, build, develop, participate in high performing teams? And that's at all levels. But certainly at the executive level, we know it has really significant cascading impact. right
Hmm.
down through the organization. And so it's perhaps higher stakes at the executive level for us to be a really high functioning group of folks. And that's relational, but also it's functional. And
Hmm.
so, as I think about your question in terms of adversity and overcoming that, and seeing different leaders, but also in my experience, coaching different leaders as a chief people officer in a number of different environments, what I've often found actually refers to something you just mentioned, which is sport. Right. When we think about sports, we think about like tennis, for example. We think about Serena Williams, who is just maybe the greatest of all time
Hmm.
out there on the court. When she is really facing adversity, what does she do? Well, sometimes we see her be a bit reactive. There's some value in that, right? Because we're
Hmm.
whole people and we need to be able to react in the right space at the right time. And then she gets really focused and she slows the ball down in her mind. And I think that's what I coach leaders to do. And that's what I do myself when things are really challenging. How can we slow the ball down? How can
Hmm.
we, instead of being reactive, be proactive in determining what are the next things that we need to be focused on? How can we elevate the team that's experiencing this so that they know they're not alone, that we're working through it with them together? How can we be reflective of the leadership values that we each have? And I've been fortunate that I've worked on teams where I have a lot of shared leadership values. That's not always the case, right? So helping people really determine what are your leadership values?
Hmm.
How is it you can really live into those during these moments of adversity? And there's a tool that I often use, the Hogan assessment, which I just personally evangelize because I think it's a fantastic tool. But there's a module in there, and it's really about understanding the items that are in that module are really about understanding what are your key derailers when you're under the most stress and you're the most exhausted and you're not at your best. What are the areas that are most likely to pop up for you? And that level of awareness, and I mean leaders at all levels, having that level of awareness about the areas that they can be watching out for when they're under the most stress so that they can manage those effectively. What I often coach is where you don't have a preference, you have to have a process. So I don't have a preference for recognition, for example. It's not something that I really enjoy. I don't seek it. But I know people on my team need it, and
Hmm.
people feel value and recognition in different ways. And so I don't have a preference for it, but I can create a process for myself to make sure people, especially in moments of adversity, are feeling recognized and valued so that they can continue to be engaged.
Wow, so many takeaways there, Emma. I really appreciate that. And certainly, there are so many tools out there that can inform that awareness as well as that process building. I
Yes.
mentioned the Hogan. We also use that here. And I really appreciate how you also bridging the gap between that awareness and reflection, whether it's from an exterior data point, such as an assessment, but how it can drive action, which if I get on my soapbox for a minute, my criticism oftentimes of assessments, and I'm a psychologist, love
Yeah.
them, but my greatest criticism is that people end up running around the office talking about what letters they are, what color they are.
Right.
And like, it really isn't data that has driven action to help them either perhaps step into the leadership role as they really want to be and be effective in, or certainly the culture transformation that can happen from it. So very much appreciate how you're threading the needle there. I talk a lot about my work has been helping leaders or many performers show up in their moments that matter. And I've done that 25 years in all of these different domains, sport, military, business. And to be moment ready, you've mentioned a couple of those things, and really I identify them as the 4 C's. So you have to be composed, you have to have clarity, you have to connect, and then all of that drives towards courageous action. I really appreciate you honoring the fact we're all human, we're going to have our reactions, and then certainly how to then you move through that reaction to be able to refocus on what matters most in that moment. The other 2 C's of connection and taking that courageous action. Some of these decisions are, quite frankly, sometimes it feels like it's the less of two evils, right? You
Yeah.
don't really
That's right.
have like a great choice. If
Right.
only we did in some of these
Right.
really challenging situations. What have you seen from leaders or your takeaways from observing, or maybe even in trial and error yourself, that when you're faced with what feels like just kind of two crappy choices, how can you still connect with people and then also take that courageous action? What empowers you, enables you, or what have you seen in others to be able to do so?
Yeah, you saying that reminds me of being in school and you have to, right, we get tests or you have to answer your homework and you've got multiple choice and it says pick the best answer. Even if none of them are good, you still have to pick an answer. And we know in business that's true too. You just sometimes have to pick the best, but the best doesn't mean it's good. And that can be very challenging. And I see this particularly in leaders who have not really lived through each of the leadership passages, right? We think often about the 6 leadership passages in terms of the leadership pipeline. And those who have jumped ahead or leapfrogged in different leadership passages, I find often struggle with this very difficult decision making framework more than others. And I've personally experienced that myself too. There are times when we have to make really tough decisions. And sometimes that can look like a reduction in force. Sometimes it can look like a shift in project teams, people who care very much about the work that they're doing, but the work no longer maybe makes sense for where the business is going. So those people won't necessarily leave the company, but they'll work in different ways. Sometimes it means spinning down or up different products than we had necessarily anticipated. There's all kinds of different ways I think people and leaders in particular experience this. And I guess from a mindset perspective, what I always try personally to keep in mind, especially in that chief people officer role, which I see very much as a business person who leads in the people function, is this business is the reason we're here. Or you could substitute anything. This nonprofit, this mission is the reason that we're here. And so if we are all clear on the mission, this gets to the clarity you talked about. We are all clear on the mission and we can connect with each other to understand how we can move the mission forward without ourselves at the center of it, which is so hard to do. Right? Because
Right.
we're each people who start from where we are sitting. Then it's, I think, a little bit easier to build to the courageous decision. It doesn't mean that what you're going to have to do is easy, but it's easier to get to what is the courageous decision that needs to be made. And when you connect with people early in that process, I think you can bring them along in it.
It's a great point. I appreciate there's never an easy button, right? Like
Right.
none of these steps are to suggest that then if you do X, Y, and Z, it will be easy or
That's
it will
right.
be comfortable, right? It will still be a challenge.
Yes.
And yet what I hear you talking about is then what helps to mitigate risk associated, like the missteps, right? With that decision and with the actioning of that decision. And then also really how can we make the best of it, right? And
Exactly.
essentially grow, innovate through this challenge. So very much appreciate that. Now I'm curious, you mentioned it starts with I in many ways, but we all are teams made up of individuals. And for you, your individual journey, I'm curious, what has fueled you? Because this is not for the weak of heart to
Yeah. It's
sustain
true.
high performance, to continue the grind, if you will. Now here you are as an entrepreneur building your own firm. What do you find refuels you, or what recovery practices really have you found that enables you to sustain a high performance over time?
Okay, I'll answer that. I want to go back to something you said because it caused
Yeah.
me to think of something that I want to make sure I say out loud. And that's maybe just that we often talk about there's no I in team. I mean, I can't tell you how many meetings I've
Yeah.
been in, how many leadership teams I've been part of, how many times I'm sure I've said it myself.
Hmm.
And yet at the same time, I think at this point in my career and at this point in my own leadership journey, what I maybe believe now more than ever is that we actually have to start with I. Because if I don't know who I am and what I value and what motivates me and why I'm showing up to be part of that team, then I can't actually show up for that team very well. And once I'm part of the team, it can't be focused on me. It can't be self centered in that way. I can't start with me. But I sure better know why I'm there as part of
Hmm.
that team.
Hmm.
And I hope that the other team members I'm working with know that too, because I think that's when you can say we're all playing toward one goal.
Hmm.
We're all shooting at the same hoop. And so I think that's a really important thing for people to go through in their leadership journey to really understand that about themselves. Now let's get to your question. I have to be honest, I'm not sure I've really cracked the code on this, right? In terms of like my own wellness and leadership journey and how those two things integrate. But what I'll say is it's an iterative effort. It's something I'm constantly working at. And I think we probably all are in
Yeah.
some way, right?
Yeah.
And so it's something that I'm committed to working on, which is maybe the best thing that I've done for myself is that instead of saying, I know it's going to be this, I know I'm going to go for a run every Tuesday, and I know I'm going to go to Soul Cycle every Thursday. Instead of it being that, it's just that I know I'm going to continue focusing on it. And some days I'm going to do a lot better than other days. But when I don't do it well, I'm going to forgive myself for that because for a long time, I think that I held on to letting myself down. I said, I'm going to start doing, I'm going to balance not my work necessarily, but my attention
Hmm.
toward making sure that I'm a well leader so that I can show up well for other people.
Sure.
And then I let myself down in that because I didn't go for the run or I didn't start the diet on the Tuesday, right?
Right.
And so I think if we can let go of that, then we can show up just as better people for ourselves, and that translates to teams. And I've certainly made some decisions over the years. Like I used to kind of do the whole New Year's resolution thing. And one year I thought, okay, this year I'm going to give myself something that I believe I can really knock out of the park.
Yeah.
And so I said, okay, I'm going to drink more champagne, which is a funny thing, right? It's
Right.
funny when you hear that. But the reality is, what I was trying to do is figure out how can I celebrate more moments, right? Because I think
Hmm.
of champagne very much as a celebratory thing. So, how can I find more moments to celebrate throughout the year so that I can sit in the success or the opportunity to kind of play the game tape, to use the sport analogy? How can I play the game tape and learn from that so that I can move it forward? Now, I didn't really succeed at that. I didn't end up drinking all that much more champagne, but it became something that I thought about instead of
Yeah.
just as soon as one milestone is achieved, moving on to the next, thinking about sitting in that moment. And I think that's also helped the teams that I've led because they see
Uh-huh.
me doing that and then they do it as well.
There's such power in celebrating those small wins, right?
Yes.
I
Yes.
think the nice part about sport is that it provides the structure of the season. And
Mm,
so you can have, the preseason game and evaluate perhaps how young talent is stepping up. Then you have maybe the non conference games leading up to the conference regular season. And you can have a build and a rival game where you knock off, upset that previous conference champion. And so there's these opportunities along the way that are very structured, built in. In private industry, in our professional lives, sometimes that can happen, product sprints, certain projects scope, I think across the quarters or an initiative. But there really isn't always that structure of seasonality, right? Like we
right.
kind of
Right.
impose some of them. And so it's really easy. It's really easy to have like, hey, that was a really challenging conversation and come home and just kind of unwind from the day and not give yourself that pat on the back. Like,
Yes.
actually, I diffused that concern really
Right.
effectively.
Right.
Or, I was really able to speak to this challenge and inspire this team. And
Exactly.
we're back on track with the same energy that we were before XYZ happened. Those small wins really are powerful refuelers. And so I appreciate the intention to drink more champagne. Love it. We love wrapping up, also giving you an opportunity to share back with our audience. Perhaps maybe that immediate takeaway, that actionable tool, strategy, something you do in your daily or weekly routine that you have found helpful in grounding you to sustain this high performance over time. Different roles, different organizations, and certainly the very quick, fast-paced, dynamic
Yes.
life that we're living. What helps you kind of center and continue on?
Yeah, I'll tell you the thing that has seemed to work most consistently for me is that every few days, I don't do it every day, but every few
Uh-huh.
days, I try to take a moment. And sometimes it really is a moment. It's when I'm walking down the hall to a meeting or when I wake up and I'm having coffee before I start emails. It's just a moment. And it's really to refocus myself, recenter myself on
Uh-huh.
what is it that I'm trying to achieve. And what I've found after doing this over many years and different roles is that it almost doesn't matter what role I'm in or what company I'm working for, which clients I have. Really, for me, that centering
Uh-huh.
is around the same thing, which is how can I make the most positive impact I'm able to make in the work that I'm doing? And that work changes and the people I'm doing it with changes. But for me, it's always about that impact. What contribution can I have? And so I think that moment of recentering, you could certainly do that in the form of journaling. You could do it in terms of gratitude. That's a big part of what I'm focused on when I do that recentering. But for me, it's just finding that moment. It's the thing that I've been able to commit to and stick to.
Such a great reminder to use that cue, right? And if you can kind of build that into, like you said, it doesn't have to be like, I've got to block an hour.
Exactly.
It can be walking
Yeah.
down the hall and just recentering back to a meaningful cue for you about how something brings you value, gratitude, impact. Very important. Emma, thank you so much for this wonderful conversation. I
You're
love
welcome.
learning from others and certainly have takeaways from you as well. So thank you very
Thanks
much.
for having me. This was fun.